Cocaine Bear from Cocaine Bear the Musical. You don't know what you don't know. Listen up, cubbies. I'm going to tell you a story about staying curious and learning. I didn't know what I didn't know. Like when the can says beer, means it's for you. I learned to read and you should too. Just like don't need no rubber shoes. You do not want them in your pool. I was unconsciously incompetent of many things. I didn't know what I didn't know I didn't know. I was unconsciously incompetent of many things. Yeah, but I was going to become consciously incompetent of things. I would know there were things I didn't know. Yeah, you ready? Goes like this. One day I met Fred the artist. He was painting me nude in the meadow. I've been busy. I went to a music festival. I wrote a song. I had a lot going on at work. And I feel like I'm just staring down this giant rail gun. There's all this energy I just see building up. And so when I look at it, you know, what do you say, right? So I have somebody in my office daily. Hey, Bob, how come my rent went up so much? Yeah, I went up 10%. Yeah, well, you know, inflation. And so I look back at the disruptive pattern that began in 2013. And I've decided, you know, around this point in the story, 2015, 2016, I decided that, I could take the silver lining on this, and that was I could learn the lessons. And one lesson that I started to learn was just how ruthless and how the system works when it comes to collecting debt. And so the lawyers in Wisconsin can sit in their offices anywhere they want while you are generally required to go to the court. And they just line these things up, 8, 9, 10 of these in a row, and they just process the debt. And then they stick you on payment plans you have no choice of. They extract it right from your check, right? And it's stressful. And you feel powerless. And the clerk at the court even acknowledge, when it comes to civil law, right, your debt, there's very little help unless you hire someone. And so, in the case of my foreclosure, right, the foreclosure had the wrong address on it. But you see, nobody in the court, nobody unless I paid them, would look at it and tell me, hey, Bob, it's got the wrong address. Just go in and tell them dismiss it based on this not being your address. You have no idea who this address belongs to. And they'll dismiss it and it'll delay it for another month or two. But nobody tells you these things. And so, you're quite incompetent in the system. And so 10 years after I began the disruptive pattern around money, I realized more fully every day just what worried me and the troubles that it causes. I wrote early on about the increases during the crash of suicides, bankruptcies, and divorces, crime and violent crime and addiction. And you go, hey, Stinky, what do you do about these things, right? And the answer was, I have to have money so that I can influence things and I can, have a voice. And so as long as I believed that money was necessary to influence and provide and present a positive outcome, I had to give up the idea of money. And in order to do that, I had to lose it all. And so, that's what I did in 2016, 2017, 2016, I think it was. I filed bankruptcy for the house and everything. And, moved into a new townhouse and, started anew. And, in that, of course, I said I started at the mill, and then eventually, in about a year after working at the mill, I had a pinched nerve in my neck, in my shoulder, and I couldn't keep doing the lifting. It was killing me every day. And so I had done standardized test scores the previous fall or spring, and I thought I'll try this full time. They're paying like $18 an hour, something like that. And my attention, I fell asleep regularly. I believe I was not asked to come back. That's fine. I had learned everything I was going to learn there. And it was time for me to begin a new endeavor. And so I started looking around at what else I might do. And because we had just rented, I went, I could do this. This doesn't look that hard. And I applied around, and I got an interview at Red Cedar Estates in River Falls. And after a phone interview, we set up a face-to-face interview, and I went down. This is probably early August 2017, something like that. And 2016, yeah, 2016. And so I went in, I sat down, we did the interview, and gentleman Vinny, still a dear friend of mine, and I think had a really good immediate rapport. And Vinny asked me, hey Bob, how do I know you're going to be here in a year? And I said, I'm going to be here in a year. I'm starting over. I'm doing something new. And so I got hired on, and the property had actually been in bankruptcy and been bought in 2014. And so for about a year and a half or 2 years, the property had just, not been managed, mostly because of a lack of skill sets, and then also because of lack of support. And in fact, the regional manager, I believe, quit in part over the property and the manager that he had there and all the problems. And so I started, and one of the first things I had to do was evict the maintenance tech who had just stopped coming into work. It's just flummoxed me. You live on the property. All you got to do is show up, fix some things, paint stuff, clean, and then I found an applicant came in, he and his mom, and I had maintenance issues all over the place. And as the manager, right, there are some maintenance issues that you have to deal with. There's one toilet in the unit, and it's clogged. You got to unclog it. And when you understand the finances of the property, you're not just calling up a plumber to come hit a plunger. And so I took care of a lot of that stuff. I had one young lady call me late August when the rain came. She says, Bob, I've got water pouring in my living room. Okay, I'm gonna come take a look. It's got pans in the middle of the floor. And I said, how long has this been doing this? And she said, since I moved in. I said, when did you move in? She said, August of last year. So this has been leaking for a year. This is the kind of problems the property had. None of the landscaping had been touched. And so, I had late recertification work, all sorts of stuff. And of course, I didn't know how to do any of this stuff, so I'm just learning on the go. But I hired a maintenance tech who had come in with his mom. They were looking for a place, and I simply said, hey, what are you doing now? You're mowing lawns. So, I need somebody 36 hours a week, and I'm gonna pay you X, and you want to come work for me? And the guy said, yeah. And so, over the next couple of years, we would rehab that entire property. And years later, Vinny would tell me that after I had left, the owners said, given the ongoing problems that, precipitated after that, Vinny, I think Bob might have been the only guy who could run that property. And if you ask me what I did for, the 3 years I was there, is I stayed out of people's shit. And I tried to deal with situations peacefully. And, I tried to be tolerant of, the individual situations people were in. And, I smoked a lot of weed. And, that property needed to mellow. and it needed somebody who cared. So we repainted the sign. We trimmed back all of the trees. I mean, we hauled trees for a week or two even. We killed weeds. We fixed doors. We painted all the halls, which hadn't probably been painted in 15 years. And it was very edifying to care for these people. And so during this time, I was doing a lot of research on, the ancient megalithic structures, alternative histories. Jamie and I used to do a lot of research on that and watch it. And I just began to feel better about creating a new start and finding a new direction. And as I would change my perception of what was going on around me over the next couple of years, something would become very apparent, and that was that there was a purpose. And it's neat when there's a purpose. When that purpose is for you to grow, you begin to ask yourself, how do you do that? And so right about this time, in 2016, I believe, Tom DeLonge had announced that he'd be coming out with his Secret Machines God's Man in War series. And then in early 2017, one of the stranger things happened. I believe it was early 2017. Yeah. When Gods was being released, I had subscribed to the Stars Academy, and they had put out a pre-order limited edition version of Gods, and it was 100 and something, 189 for the capital A to capital Z, and it was $89 for lowercase a to lowercase c. And I was really tempted to buy one of them. I really wanted to, but we just didn't have any money at that time. I mean, things were really tight. I ordered regular Gods, but as I was considering this limited edition, I clicked a link that took me on to the Amazon review of the book, so you could review a part of the book and decide if you wanted to buy it. And here's the thing. I was like right at this rush of getting out the door. And so I pulled the book up and I left it on my desktop. But before I did, in just the few fleeting moments that I had, I read the first paragraph. And at the end of the very first paragraph of the limited edition of Gods, presented as an option on Amazon to read a fraction of, on the very first page, it says that all religion is cargo cult religion. The very last sentence of the very first paragraph. That's not what the book that was issued says. It does not say those words in the very first sentence. However, for some reason, this version I read did. I thought I took a screenshot of it. But I left it open, and I left for my appointment. And while I was gone, my computer reset. It had been doing this for a little while, but it had never done it when I just left it alone. I came back and I couldn't use the link again. The purchasing offer was over. So, the question then becomes, Bob, why did you see this? What does this mean? What is the implication of this? And the implication is that there's a much more distinct version of Gods. And I would love to ask Peter Levenda if that's true. And if so, what are some of the things that become more distinct in that original version of Gods? So the book came out, and it was revelatory. I opened myself up and I said, well, what is this book really trying to tell us? Right? I have a deep sense that Tom DeLonge is telling the truth. And not only that, but you have to remember, in 2016, you had the WikiLeaks email release. And within that were a number of emails from Tom DeLonge to, like, for example, the head of Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, and a U.S. Air Force general. And so he was emailing John Podesta, who was a part of the Clinton campaign. And, it did, as I read Gods and I looked at that release of information, right? Tom said, well, in an interview, said, hey, it at least proves that we were talking to the people that we were talking to. But of course, once that information came out, things just stopped. And so the question is, what was the aegis of the release of those documents? Because of everything released in the Podesta documents, these are literally the most important of all of the documents, because they confirm that Tom is having a legitimate discussion with individuals as part of the disclosure of the phenomenon that's occurring around us. And so, I opened myself up and said, hey, okay, so take whatever Tom says, right? Not necessarily with just a grain of salt or skepticism, but with, an open mind. What might the implications of this be? Does it fill in? Does it connect, right? I have a high degree of finding similarities. Are there similarities to what Tom is saying and to what I've been writing about for the last 5 years? And as it turned out, there were several similarities that were in that distinction. And not the least of which was that I was having very synchronistic experiences. And so one of the emails that was most interesting that Tom put out was that he was beginning to create projects that were going to tell the stories and provide the information in a series of artistic works, movies, books, songs, right, cartoons, that would help to reveal what the nature of the phenomenon is, right? And he said that he'd already met with a number of people in Hollywood and that they too were already engaged in these actions. And I went, oh, really? Oh, really? So what Tom is saying is that what we might call, what's the word? When they're prepping you to the bigger information, they cue you information over a period of time. And I can't recall the phrase that it's used for. Excuse me, I'll throw it up here or something. But, what it means is that there are stories being told that are important and that are meant for the planet, like everyone. And so then you have to stop for a minute and you go, so wait a minute, what would be the implications of that? What would that mean? What would that look like? And the answer is, well, one, if the purpose were to make something that you wanted the entire world to see, that would provide it information and new paradigm shifting truth, it would have to be really, really, really excellent. And so when you look at the top box office hits, you look at Avatar, right? What is Avatar? Avatar is nothing more than a juxtaposition of what the European infiltration of the Americas did to the Native Americans. It is the same juxtaposition that we see in the second movie of what the industrial complex of food and the machinery of society is doing to our oceans and our waters, right? And so if there's a lesson amongst what Tom was saying, it's that we are not only seeing this provided in a purposeful way by individuals in Hollywood and perhaps other genres, right? So, what is really the aegis behind Ancient Aliens? Who really is asking the big question, what do we cover next? And so I was becoming aware that at the same time as those folks were doing that work, the implication was that there were also forces at work who were non-corporeal. That is to say, they aren't physical in their existence.